2, 1. All right. Well, I want to say thank you to Joseph Bonin, my friend here. He's a fellow brother from Freemasonry. He's the former worshipful master of Honolulu Lodge, which falls under the Grand Lodge of Hawaii. I'm in a different lodge. I'm in Hawaiian Lodge. But I wanted to bring him on just to have a discussion about Freemasonry in general, how it's impacted his life, how it's impacted my life, the things that you've got to experience through Freemasonry and people that you've met, and then your experiences as an officer in the lodge. So why don't you just go ahead and give a little bit of background about yourself, and then we'll just kind of free flow from there.
Okay. Yeah, I came. I grew up in Texas. I came here through the Marine Corps. Was stationed in Hawaii. Just never left.
Yeah, same.
Worked in law enforcement, essentially for the last 30 years. Then came to Masonry in 2012, and was an officer for about 7 years in the line, and now I'm basically a free agent.
So yes, now you're retired. You're a past master. And what year was your, I guess, leadership in
2017.
Was it 2017?
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's so long ago, it feels already, because COVID, yeah? So,
Well, yeah, COVID is that big black hole that in time that...
everyone's life just was kind of put on pause.
Yeah, you kind of count the victims of COVID. You know, these things that you do every year. Every year I tend to get a Best Pictures movie pass around February. That's something that Regal puts out that for $35 they're showing all the films that were nominated for Best Picture. So you can watch these films as many times as you want on that $35 over a week and a half period leading up to the Oscars.
Oh, wow.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and of course, COVID, it's gone. It's another victim of COVID. So,
well, I wonder if they'll bring it back. Oh, I don't know.
They're in the mainland. They actually went ahead. A couple of states went ahead and kept up with it. So I do believe they make a pretty good, decent amount of money off of it. So I don't think they're going to get rid of that anytime soon. So
yeah, you have to go to the movies like for a whole week. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
to see all of them.
Well, they would show, I think it was 4 films a day, every day for a week and a half. So, like, when the last time we had it, I saw Ford versus Ferrari like twice. I saw, I want to say, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I saw that 3 times. And I saw every single film nominated. So it kind of makes a difference when you're watching the Oscars that you know all these films and you're like, okay, I can see why they nominated this. Even though I didn't like the film, I can see the quality of the film or whatever. So
that's interesting. Yeah, it seems like you got to be a real like film connoisseur of sorts then.
You can grow into one if you watch enough of them, but yeah. So 2017, it does seem like a long time ago, but it was only 4 years ago.
Yeah, holy crap. 2017. I don't even remember what I was doing in 2017 now. But so, for people who don't understand how it works, I guess basically to be the head of the lodge or the worshipful master of the lodge, you normally have to serve in each chair or each position before that. Could you just give a little bit of a breakdown on how that works for people who might not know?
Well, your typical lodge that has a large pool of people that are willing to sit the officer's line, then you have generally this 7-8 year process where you start from the steward, then you do a year's worth of steward work, and that's really where you're first showing your commitment. Because that's when the stewards are essentially their responsibility is to ensure that the refreshments are taken care of, because that is a tradition.
That's super important to you.
Yes, there is a saying in Masonry: if we're gonna meet, we're gonna eat.
Yeah, if we're gonna meet, we're gonna eat. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, and you're talking about, this is not anything that popped up in the last 100 or even 200 years. We can stretch back to the Regis manuscript, which, while it purports to be reporting on something that occurred in 900 A.D., from a logical standpoint, even if we don't want to believe that what it's referring to in 900 A.D. actually occurred, we can know for sure that it was dated. The document itself was dated in 1390. So you know that at least this tradition was that old, because within the Regis manuscript it gives that set of duties to the stewards, that you're in charge of the refreshment, and it's not that it was invented with the Regis manuscript, or necessarily even in the meeting that it reports to discuss, that supposedly happened in 900 A.D. under Athelstan's, the then King of England's direction. But it was a tradition that, according to the Regis manuscript, was already there. It was already instituted. So for the stewards, that can stretch over 700 years.
Oh,
easily.
wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you got this steward position, and then you've got a number of other positions above it. And what you're really learning when you're taking each one of these positions for a year is you're learning a different aspect of what that lodge needs. Because, truth be told, a lodge is really a living thing.
Right.
It is a representation of the Mason himself, but just like the Mason himself, it is a living thing that requires a diverse set of things to occur in order for it to survive hundreds of years. Because in Hawaii, we have lodges that are over 100 years old, and there's no sign that they're going to not make another 100 years or more. And you've got lodges in England and America that are more than 200 years old.
Yeah.
So these things have a like I said, a complex set of criteria that they need to meet to continue to survive, if not thrive, because it requires rotating in new membership. It requires business to be done. This is a nonprofit, and you still have to deal with the IRS. You gotta understand accounting for nonprofit organizations. I mean, you could get away with not necessarily knowing these kind of things, but you're not gonna have a healthy lodge if you don't.
You're definitely not pulling your weight.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that not everything. I mean, not everybody's a business person. Not everybody is a cook.
Yeah, me.
Not everybody is a great orator. I mean, these are all the complex little things that need to happen. So when you're moving up that officer's line, each stop along the way, you're developing yourself, and that's a very interesting thing about Masonry. I've seen people that are, how shall I say, they're very drawn within themselves, because that's something that Masonry attracts. It attracts people that have spent a lot of time self-reflecting.
Yeah.
They spend a lot of time looking at their place in the world around them, and that's generally what Masonry is there for, is to help someone who's looking for that to understand not only the way the church will teach you your place with God, and say psychology will teach you your place with other people, Masonry is really giving you the clues to understand your place in that triangle, your place with the supreme architect of the universe, God, your place, and how that affects your place with the rest of mankind, and in that three-way triangle. So yeah, I've seen people drawn within themselves that were fairly timid, but by the time they became master, they experienced, maybe for the first time in their life, the confidence to know, hey, I've got this. I'm assuming master. I know that the sword of Damocles is over my head. The health of this lodge is on my head. And honestly, as a master, it's a funny thing. I said this in my installation speech. I said, it's a very funny thing that I started my career in the officers line as a steward, and I'm ending it as a steward, because that's what a master is.
Right.
A master is like a ship captain. He has the fundamental ability to change his lodge, to just completely turn it on its head, but he should never seek to do that unless the lodge is completely broken. Because a lodge's health depends on, yes, it's in moving forward, but if it turns around and shifts gears every time there's a new master, there's no continuity, there's no growth. It's just taking one step forward and taking one step back. So yeah, as a master, you're assuming this thing, and you realize you're a steward, and the life of the lodge is on you, but you have learned all the things that are really necessary for that, coming up that 7-year line. Now, it is true when you have a lodge that doesn't quite have enough incoming membership, there's sometimes that, or especially here in Hawaii, we have a lot of military will go into the lines, and then they will get called to PCS out.
Yeah, and that's a strain.
Yeah, you have people that then, and this happened to me, then have to move 1 or 2 positions up. But as long as one of the things that we do that I'm glad that we do is we do make people qualify in positions. And if you jump 2 positions, you need 2 particular positions. Once you get past a certain point in the lodge where you're closing in on becoming a pillar or a master, is you have to qualify for every one of those positions. So you may not get a year's worth of time to grow in that position or whatever, but you're still going to have to know the job. So.
Yeah, and that's interesting too. Like the journey through the chairs is not one that I've taken on. Maybe one day in the future. It's just sometimes life is just too busy, But let's go back before you were in charge of the lodge, before you were an officer, before you were a member. What kind of drew you into Freemasonry in general? Because I find a lot of people are interested in Freemasonry, but I guess they have the perception that someone in your family had to be a Mason for you to be a member, or a lot of people, they'll see like my ring, I wear the ring, or any other logo that somebody might wear, and they say they see it, but they're afraid to ask. And it's kind of hard to tell people who you don't know, no. To be one, ask one. You can ask. No one minds it. But people don't really understand that. Yeah. So I guess I kind of just want to figure out like what got you interested, how you became interested. Because again, like I was saying, like maybe there's other people who might hear this, and it might encourage them to kind of like do what I did and just show up to a lodge and say, hey, I'm interested. I don't know what to do or who to talk to.
Well, that's a funny one. Essentially, beforehand, I had no interest in Masonry. And it's a funny thing. My one time I ever had any discussion with my parents or any of my family about the concept of Masonry was I had friends that were in DeMolay back in Texas, and they loved it, and they wanted me to come join them in DeMolay, and I got invited to a meeting, and when I asked my mother, she's like, no, I don't trust those people. She knew it was associated with the Masonic Lodge, and I never really paid any attention to we drove past the Masonic Lodge and just never paid attention to it. It was just one of the buildings in my hometown. And that was the end of it. Never discussed it again. But it is kind of funny. I know that some of my really old ancestors had to be Masons, because the first Bonin to come to America was actually a person assigned to a fort in the French territory. We don't know when he got here, but he was married there in 1740. But his dad, when he left France to get assigned to this, it's recorded he was a plasterer. That's in France, in Grenoble, France, and that's where that constituted a Mason. That was part of Masonic work. When you build the cathedrals and all that, you have to have your plasterer goes in and applies the plaster. So I know that they were Masons at least hundreds of years ago, but I don't know when that connection stopped or ended. I mean, it could have ended with my grandfather, and I have no idea because we never discussed it. But now my first real exposure to the concept of Masonry was I read some of the books that like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and I may have read Temple in the Lodge before I joined Masonry, but what the picture that they really painted was a secret society that had some painted it as nefarious intent, some painted it as just okay, well they're there to do favors for each other and things like that, or they're there to curry favor, and none of that honestly piqued my interest. I could have cared less. The big interest that I had in the Holy Blood, Holy Grail was the investigation they were doing and discovering that, well, wow, this entirely thing is founded on assumption. The case wasn't really necessarily built on solid foundation, and so I kind of read it and said, well, this not particularly life changing or anything like that. So it didn't think another thing of it, but I am an avid reader, and I did spend a lot of time in used bookstores, still do. And one day I picked up a book called The Builders. And The Builders was a book that was written by the Grand Lodge in Iowa in 1914, solely for the purpose of giving to their master masons once they're raised. And I bought it, I put it on my shelf, and didn't get to it for years, because that's kind of the way my reading works. I buy faster than I read, so when I finish a book, I start looking at my shelves, and I'm like, okay, now what do I want to know now?
Yeah,
and
I do that too. Yeah.
So it was a while before I finally looked at that book, and I said, yeah, well, it's time for that one. I got time for this. So I sat down and I read it. Now, what struck me about this book, a lot of it was stuff that I didn't quite understand because I wasn't a Mason, and it really covers a lot of things that you're learning through your first couple of years of Masonry. But what struck me about it was how it talked about some concepts that I had learned from my own religious experience or my own religious connection, where I finally got my relationship with God straightened straight and understood at least what I believed, what he expected of me, and my place, how that fit in there. What it really kind of bothered me as I grew in my religious training was how much, even within the like Christianity, how much stone throwing there is at other people.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, well, they're not, and I hate this term, they're not true Christians because they don't do this, or they're not true Christians because they don't do that. And what I see when I look at the Bible, I mean, I've read cover to cover the King James Version, the New World Translation, the NIV, the American, forget what the title of that one was, I think New American Scientific Bible or something along those lines. There's a number of Bibles that I've read and compared, and I've read St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, and Pascal, and all these theologians and things like that. And what I see when I see the Bible is that I am probably statistically wrong about at least a quarter of what I think they're trying to say to me. And I mean, you have to come to that conclusion when you read that Bible, if not every day, at least once a week or frequently enough, and you realize that you frequently find something in there that you were like, I didn't understand this before, and now I understand it. Well, there was a time when you thought you understood everything in that Bible. So I've seen all these people throwing rocks at each other, but here was a book that was written in 1914 by a past grandmaster in Iowa, and he's talking about the concept that if someone is Jewish, Hebraic, he worships Yahweh. And if someone is a Christian, they worship Jesus, yes, but they also worship Jehovah. And if someone is Muslim, they worship Allah. They have three different names, but they are essentially, if you pin people down, they're the same God. They're all, I mean, they admittedly will tell you, yeah, we're talking about the same God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac. A Muslim will tell you that. This is the God of Abraham. This is the God of Isaac. And they'll tell you this is the God of Ishmael. And if you get somebody that's objective who is a Christian, will tell you, yeah, he's the God of Ishmael too. Yeah. And the same way with a Jewish person. So the question he's putting is, if they're worshiping the same God, why can't I not call them brother? Why do I have to throw rocks at this person because they have a difference of opinion on who's the prophet and who's the Christ and all this? It isn't your religious experience, your relationship with God is a very personal thing. What your relationship with God is in no way affects me. So I've never understood a need to throw rocks or criticize or whatever other people for their religious beliefs because it doesn't affect me and my relationship with God. Exactly. So here's somebody in 1914 talking about this. And he's also talking about concept of bigotry and racial bigotry. And I mean, that's pretty advanced concepts for 1914 for society in America, for this person to be talking about this. And he's talking about these old world concepts of knowledge, talking about the 7 lamps of architecture, and he's going into the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And
that sounds like a good. I might have to check that out. Yeah, if I can find one.
There is a copy of it in the Temple Library.
Is there?
Yeah, yeah. And if you can find a copy of it at a used bookstore, I would snatch it up because those are they're very good books. And I honestly, I have not read it since I became a Mason.
Mm.
I read it before I became a Mason, and when I read this, I'm like, this is what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
This is a group of people who understand that concept of being more tomorrow than what you are today. Always constantly learning more and getting your relationship with God and getting your relationship with your fellow man in order, and learning what is it, what kind of man does God want me to be, and how do I become that?
Mm-hmm.
So once I read that, I remember there were other Masonic books. I mean, I came across a copy of Duncan's Ritual Freemasonry in
Mm-hmm.
Barnes and Noble or something like that before I read Builders, and I looked at it and I realized it was a book on an old discussion of parts of Masonry that I was like, what interest would I have in that? But something in my mind told me pick it up, so I picked it up and it stayed on my shelf. But once I read the Builders, I was like, well, you know, this could be a new chapter. I've experienced that a lot in my life. Is sometimes it's thrust on you, sometimes you seek it, but it's part of growth. Is you're gonna get these certain new chapters that whether it's thrust on you or whether, I mean, one of the new chapters that was thrust on me was when my dad died.
Mm-hmm.
That was the last of my parents, and there's a little something that goes on in your head where you're realizing, okay, well, that was, while I never really fell back on my parents for anything other than maybe a phone card or something so I could make phone calls. I never really fell back on them for any major loans or moved back into the house, but it's still nice to have that safety net in life of not just financial, but emotional, or as a man, knowing that if you need advice, there's one or two people out there that you can always go to.
Yeah.
So it became a new chapter, and I saw the potential for Masonry to be a potential new chapter, to step into something and commit to something that may advance me as a man forward. And that's another very important part of it was, especially in this day and age, there's a dwindling amount of opportunity to advance yourself as a man, as opposed to just human being in general. We kind of try to curb our paternalistic societal nature, and that has to happen. We do have made that mistake over the years of trying to paint the female of the species as, while they may be technically physically weaker, and I don't want to say they're weak or anything like that, but physically, when you look at male athletes and female athletes of the same amount of training or whatever, a man is generally going to be stronger in certain things, but in reality, they're not the weaker sex as a human being. They have different strengths from us.
Exactly.
And we complement each other.
Exactly.
Where we are weak on empathy, we're strong on strength, and that's just part of being a man. Is in that concept of marrying those two strengths and weaknesses to cover each other. That's a beautiful thing, but you still, as a man, you still have to develop those strengths that you have. And I mean, when you read like John Bly's Iron Iron John, or is it? Sorry, I think it might be Robert Bly. And I have the book around the corner too. So.
You have so many books. People can't see this because I haven't done like a video setup yet. There's a ton of books here.
Yeah, it kind of creeps up on you. Just to give the quote, let me go around the corner and make sure I quote this author real quick. Sorry, I'm back. Yes, it was. I was correct. It was Robert Bly, Iron John. The whole concept of that book is actually the loss of the male training ground that was the grandfather. Mm-hmm. In the old days, a grandfather became the one that taught a son to hunt and do all the things that a man has to do, because generally a grandfather has the time. Yeah. They're generally retired. Yeah. I mean, whereas a father has to be out there working all the time. So that Masonry, I could see that was one of the few last realms where you could go and be among other men and talk about what makes a good man.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you what makes a good woman, because I'm not a woman. I don't.
Yeah, no,
I mean, they're kind of, in my opinion, two different things.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, and all I did, there was nothing in the builders that told me how to become a Mason or whatever. As I recall, I Googled it. That basically something in Wikipedia or something like that said, well, yeah, you just have to reach out.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of shocked, because I looked up Honolulu Freemasonry.
Yeah,
on the web.
I did. That's kind of how I got into it too, but we'll get into that later. But.
Yeah, so it pops up. Hey, well, this super secret society has web pages.
Yeah.
What is this?
Wait a second.
Yeah. So
History Channel. What are you doing here?
Yeah. So I called the number on there, and mistakenly when I asked the secretary, I'm talking to him, I'm saying, yeah, that's a slip of the tongue. I said, yeah, I was interested in joining the Masons Union. And and he goes, well, what did you say? And I'm like, oh, no, I'm sorry. A mistake. Masons Lodge. Yeah. So, yeah. And as happens pretty much every time, he just said, okay, well, you just come down on this night of the week. At this location, introduce yourselves, and at this time, and we'll get the ball rolling. So that's where it took off. So, and
it can be, and that's kind of how I did. I joined in 2010, and I joined because I had heard about Freemasonry a lot. When I was in the military. Up at Schofield, there's a lodge with just a symbol on it, like no windows.
Yeah.
Everyone was always like, oh, those Masons, they're in there planning things.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Whatever. And I was on this team. It's called the SRT. It's a special reaction team.
I was on one.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, perfect, because military police, yeah?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so it's a tighter group than normal, and we had this one guy. He would always, everything that happened, the Freemasons, man.
Yeah.
The first sergeant you ever see his ring, he's a Mason. He always shows it when he's talking. Yeah. And I started noticing, like, oh yeah, he has a Masonic ring with it's a red jewel. I didn't know much about nothing.
Yeah.
And just throughout the whole time for like a year, it was just, okay, yeah, the Masons. Oh, everything was the Masons in a more joking sense.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know nothing about it.
Yeah.
And then at that time, kind of like History Channel was actually teaching history and things, and I would see these documentaries about Freemasonry and lodges and history, and I said, "Oh, that's kind of fascinating." It's a place that they even say, like, to make good men better.
Yes.
Well, why wouldn't you want to join that kind of organization? And if you're a conspiracy theorist and you're thinking that they're planning the New World Order and taking over mankind and such, well, I mean, why wouldn't you want to join that club? Like, why do you? So I did the same thing. I was home in Pennsylvania at the time because my it was right after. Well, my dad had gotten cancer, so I had went home for a little bit, and I Googled it, and it was the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. I emailed them, but then I was like, well, I'm going back to Hawaii. I said, let me check Hawaii. So I did. I Googled, and that's when I found Hawaiian Lodge. And actually, Hawaiian Lodge got back to me, oh, wow, almost instantly.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure if the Grand Lodge at Pennsylvania ever emailed me back. But so yeah, and the same thing. They told me they asked a few questions. I answered those. He said, show up on this day at this time and just go introduce yourself. And now that part was kind of like, that's intimidating to just show up somewhere.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And just being told this group that you may know little to nothing about, and you just have to show up.
Yep.
Yeah, that's definitely intimidating, but
yeah, it can be. It is. That's especially with so much experience we all have with people that are hustling you and things like that, and also you've got conflicting stories of what these guys are about, and I mean, there is a lot of there are books out there that will tell you that it's own religion, and it's actually anti Christian. Like, I don't want to in any way get strapped into any of this.
Exactly. Yeah,
so,
same.
So yeah, and you're going there, and you're trying to get a quick assessment on these guys. Because you're like, okay, well, I don't want to go down any road that I can't get out of.
Yep.
And that was one of the things that immediately struck me was these were really good people, decent people, and it did spark my mind thinking back to people that I knew were Masons, like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Harry Truman, and I'm like, well, these are not guys that would in any way get involved with an anti-Christian organization. They would not get involved in anything that's looks to overthrow the government of the United States, because, like George Washington and the Founding Fathers, these guys were in a position that they could have.
Yeah.
I mean, they were going to offer
kingdomship.
They were going to offer George Washington to name him a king.
Yeah.
And he, no.
Yeah, because he probably was worshipful master of a lodge one time and said, I don't want to be a king.
Well, I mean, yeah, it really speaks to his personality. He's not someone who is power hungry. Yeah. So if he was deeply involved in this, and so was Benjamin Franklin, who was his policy was, I do not ever run for office, but I don't turn down nominations because they're asking you to do your duty as a citizen. He saw office as a duty as a citizen, so these people weren't looking to overthrow the government, because they had the government handed to them on a silver platter, and they said, no, I don't want that. Yeah. So
that just shows the character. See, a lot of people look past it because of all this nonsense that they hear about, that people tell them, people who are non-Masons that just don't know anything about it, but think they know because some guy told them something, But when you're exactly right. When you look back at these guys, they had the ability to create their own kingdom. It could have been that we could have still been ruled under the Washington family or something by now, but and that just kind of goes to show just one of those things about Masonry, like the Masonic lodges always tend to be progressive. You know, the thoughts that were going on in secret when they had to be a secret society of the arts and the sciences that you couldn't talk about above ground because of the church and things like this. Many of the things that we have today are a direct result due to them, meeting in secret and continuing discussions and such.
Well, what it historically, what it became a meeting place of men of, number one, they had that religious background of they were subservient to one God, and they had Masonry. When you're talking about that time frame where Europe and South America were throwing off monarchies, especially in South America. When Europe was throwing off its monarchies, France, or well, I mean before France, really, the lodges in South America were giving asylum to anybody fleeing a despotic European country for political reasons.
Oh, nice.
And when the places like Uruguay and Chile and Bolivia and all that, when they were fighting against Spanish rule and trying to establish their independence. You're talking about this was led by Bolivar and Giuseppe Garibaldi was one of the generals of one of the armies. When you look at the leaders of all the revolutions all along South America, every one of them was a Mason. As a matter of fact, Giuseppe Garibaldi's, who he is people are, I'm sure somebody in the background is like, well, wait a minute, that's Giuseppe Garibaldi. He was instrumental in creating the independence of Italy from the Vatican State. Well, yeah, that's true, but that happened after he initially was part of that charge when they first got started trying to do that, but he got convicted and sentenced to death, and he managed to escape. He escaped to South America, and it was South America where he learned his guerrilla fighting skills. He put together his first red shirt army, and those red shirts were all made up of people that he met in the Masonic Lodge, which granted him asylum. He became raised because he went to these lodges for that asylum, and he started associating with other people that were successful at what they do and were anti-tyrannical. Mm-hmm. They wanted to throw off any tyranny anywhere in the world. So he then helped. He was instrumental in the independence of Uruguay. And then after that was done, I won't go into all the details about the new pope coming in and his hopes on that new pope, but he did eventually go back to Italy and got caught up in further issues with the Vatican and became instrumental in the creation of the Kingdom of Italy, which was only lasted for a very short period of time before it became a full democratic republic. But
it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating to see what these guys back in the day were accomplishing.
Yeah, I mean,
because I'm like 35, and I'm like, I should have started 2 kingdoms by now. I feel like,
yeah, it's fortune favors the bold and the strong, and these guys, they were very, well, they were also facing a tyrannical government like what we have never understood or understood. We kind of get all wrapped around the axle about some petty things these days, but we didn't have to face the issues that these guys faced hundreds of years ago because they laid the groundwork, and to some degree we get a little spoiled, but we are privileged due to their sacrifices, their boldness.
Yeah. I mean, even in the U.S., I mean, we have our own issues too. Mm-hmm. I consider them all like growing pains, but won't get too much into that. But nothing compared to what these guys in the past. I mean, it just fascinates me. Like even with Washington, like just the fact that there was this whole continent that was inhabited, but these guys just came over and they decided, you know what, we're kind of tired of them over here doing their own thing, as in England, you know. And, just I don't know, it's weird, planning and plotting and using a revolution, and that's just, it's mind blowing to me.
Well, yeah, to organize,
Yeah.
and we, I mean, going through history, yeah, it wasn't necessarily perfect. They did blow some things out of proportion, but in the end, you have to accept that a country clear across the ocean doesn't necessarily have, if they're not representing their people, or their people are their, and I've seen this in a smaller microcosm, organizationally. When you get somebody from a distance that is controlling your resources, they will tend to divert the funds or the resources to their benefit and not to yours.
Yeah.
And when that gets to a point where you're basically almost becoming slaves because you're processing the resources, you're putting it on ships, and you're sending it to them, and they're charging you money
Yeah.
for the privilege of doing so. Well, then you start to have to back up, you know. And I mean, just to if you ever want a refresher, all you got to do is pull up the Declaration of Independence, because within the first sections of that, they're laying their grievance out,
Yeah.
as far as why, hey, this has come to a head, and this is where we're at.
And that's kind of a lie too. Like, and we don't have to get too much into it, but things like free speech, the right to bear arms, you know, the protections against illegal searches and seizures, like they're there for a reason. And again, like you said, like we're privileged because we haven't been in a situation where we really needed all of those combined.
What I have noticed, not to digress too far off the subject, but what I have noticed is that when you look at states or areas, even in our own country, the ones that have a greater respect for firearms ownership or whatever, are actually the societies that more recently had to throw off an oppressor. And I know a lot of historians, when it comes to Texas fighting for its independence or whatever, will lay down a lot of, I'm not going to say it's revisionist history, because a lot of it is true. It's just you got to be in the situation at the time to really understand how these things coalesce, and history is not perfect, but you got to accept it for what it was. But Texas being the most possibly the most recent state in the Union that actually had to throw off an oppressor, they have that tendency to value the ability to do it again, that a lot more than, say, New England or whatever, who hasn't had to deal with that since 1776, and it's just becomes part of society in that area. And that's something I love about this country is it's 50 small countries.
Yeah, that's one thing that people they don't really. It took me a while to comprehend that too. But yeah, like each state is its own basically country. Like the language, the slang, the I guess the arts, the
values,
food, values,
and that's the beautiful thing here. If you are in a state that you really don't agree at all with the culture or anything, you can pick up and move to another state in this country without any limitations and be amongst people that have your same opinions, and you can live that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's a great thing. But yeah, getting back to where we digressed. But yeah, the concept of these lodges being places where, you know,
free thought.
Yeah, free thought. You were saying it. Yeah, I mean that's what got us there was people are within Masonry generally tend to be people that are more accepting of the need for debate, the need to scientifically talk about things, and and I actually mentioned that in my my exit speech when I turned over mastership to the next master. I said, you know, in my opinion, the United States, and I'm saying this in December 2017, the United States, the world, and for that fact, needs Masonry more than ever.
I agree.
Because our love of the arts of logic, rhetoric, and grammar, being able to talk about things from a scientific standpoint rather than emotional,
Yeah.
and our ability to see the whole human species as one family is what is necessary. And I said, well, to illustrate this, I said, I'm not going to reach to a Mason. I'm actually going to reach to an anti-Mason, Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens was actually an anti-Mason, but that was because of what Masonry visibly was in his time. He was rabidly, very much fighting childhood poverty and living conditions and things like that, and he didn't see... because the lodge wasn't necessarily doing the charitable work, he didn't understand that a lodge is not set up to do the charitable work. It's set up to train men and create men that do the charitable work on their own.
Yeah, correct.
So,
yeah.
But one of the things when he wrote A Christmas Carol, the very last scene where he's talking to the spirit of Christmas present, he's about to go and he's about to face the final ghost, but he says, "Forgive me, spirit, but I see something under your robes that's not quite yours. Is it a foot or is it a claw?" And the spirit says, "It could be a claw for all the meat that's on it." And he opens up his robe, and there's a boy and a girl, and they're emaciated, they're starving, they're ravenous. And he says, "Are these your children, spirit?" And he says, "They are man's children. The boy is ignorance. The girl is want. Beware them both, but most of all beware the boy. For I see written on his forehead that which is doom. Admit that he exists, but do nothing about it. Slander those who will tell others about him, and doom will engulf you all." Now, I don't know what that means, but it sounds pretty bad.
Yeah.
But it is a description of the day that we live in. We have a portal to the information superhighway in our pocket, but yet ignorance still runs rampant. And for Masonry to be able to reach out there and redesign the way people talk to each other, because right now we're a lot. When you get into political debate, you're really just getting into hauling out talking points.
Yeah, it's just whatever the Facebook feed feeds you.
Yeah, and I've actually watched that happen among friends that they were discussing, I think it was the ACA or something like that, and one of them was saying something from a more progressive, liberal point of view, and the other person who was saying it talking from a more conservative point of view was assuming that because he said one part of that talking point, he assumed all the other little factors, and he responded with, "Okay, well, you can't do that because but the other guy never said to do that. He was discussing something else, and the same thing happened later on in the conversation, going the opposite direction. So, I mean,
I just did a podcast with Alfonso Braggs. He's the president of the NAACP Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And we got into that conversation too, the lack of debate, and then the impact of like social media on people's inability to debate. I mean, it's even like if you could post anything, and someone would just look at it, not think that there's multiple layers to what you're saying.
Yep. And
then
they'll respond
with boom, attack. And it's like, it's even when you watch the news. I like what Alfonso Braggs said. Some of my more left-wing and progressive friends, they don't agree with the idea that you should watch Fox News. You should watch conservative news. You should read the Daily Wire. you should watch CNN. You should read progressive news. Like,
Yeah,
you should,
I mean, I'm fairly conservative, and one of my favorite things to do when I work on our island is to listen to NPR.
Yeah.
NPR is actually pretty good. I mean, it does have a more progressive liberal stance, but it covers, like, all things considered.
I just don't understand personally, like, why people can't tell when it's a commentator and when it's a reporter.
Right. Yeah.
A commentator is someone like Don Lemon or these the personalities. They're giving you an opinion based on a topic.
Yeah.
Somewhere within their opinion is the truth, but also on Fox News, who's it, Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson, Talking Heads. But somewhere within their opinion is the truth. You just got to be willing to kind of dig, right? And do a little bit of analysis.
Yeah.
That's all I want. But
well, I think what the world really needs, and what I think Masonry would be in a decent position to provide it, if and it's not necessarily that Masonry or the Grand Lodge would tell people, hey, you need to do this or whatever. It's just like in South America in 1800s, it's the members that get together and say, hey, there's a need here.
Yeah.
Not as Masons, but as men. Let's go do something. You know, let's not just sit here and watch history or watch the house burn down around our ears or whatever. But what we could really use is a different way of arguing, or a different way of talking to each other. And the way that I've always tried to promote within my own lodge in my year when I was master was applying scientific method or scientific process at least, which was to you narrow it down to a digestible problem. And number one, Masonry does not discuss politics, and I laid it out. You can talk good government, but just not politics. And the way that you can recognize the two is when you bring a party or an individual into the mix, that becomes politics. For instance, the Affordable Care Act is a perfectly fine topic of conversation. Obamacare is not. Because you may say that they're the same thing, but once you put a person's name on it, it becomes argumentum ad hominem, argument against the man. So first and foremost, whatever topic you discuss, it doesn't matter whether John Boehner put that health care out there or Obama or who put it out there. It's the bill itself that is good or bad on its merits, and that's what you got to keep in mind. Number one, you narrow it down to something that's digestible within the time frame that you have to discuss this, and then you try to establish what are the things that we agree on. What are the facts of this particular thing? And most likely one of the things that you're going to have to agree on is what is the nature of the problem. If we're discussing a problem like poverty or poverty in among children, or poverty in this particular district or whatever, is what are the symptoms of this problem that let us know that this is in fact a problem? And I mean, obviously poverty is
complex.
Yeah, it's complex, but it's also an obvious thing that it's a problem. But there are things about it that will lead you to your discussion on how to fix it.
Yeah.
So you have to make these agreements on, number one, what do we already agree on? So we're not sitting here assuming the other person is discussing it from this one side, like one-dimensional.
Like just because Obama introduced it, they support it.
Or that on a particular subject, they say someone is anti Second Amendment or anti firearms, or they may not necessarily be anti Second Amendment, but they are for, say, restrictions. I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a very conservative person. I very much believe the Second Amendment is a constitutional right, but all good government is a balancing act, and I don't know of any rational human being that's going to tell you that a person with schizophrenia has a right to a firearm.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really is going to fight really hard to say that a convicted murderer that got paroled on a technicality or served his term has a right to a firearm.
Yeah.
There is, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that because of the First Amendment, a person has a right to constantly call somebody and tell them, "Hey, I'm going to kill you next week Friday."
Right, yeah.
Or, I mean, there
And we
is
have
a
those
balancing
protections,
act.
yeah.
Yeah, there is a balancing act to everything. So, what you're doing when you're establishing these facts and establishing what you agree on, you now both kind of starting this discussion with a greater understanding of where you stand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're not assuming each other is buying the entire candy store of political viewpoint that generally comes with their one part of their side of the argument. So you can certainly move forward, and then what you do is you sit there and you have that discussion about, okay, well, what's the symptoms and what's then you throw out there, well, this is what I think fitting within those facts or whatever. What I think the solution is. And then you can sit there and have that debate of within the scientific process. The next step is, of course, trying to figure out what tests could we apply to this hypothesis to prove it wrong. And then once you've gone through it and you run out of tests and you can say, okay, the chances are this is right. This is the way to do the way to go. So I think that would be a very worthwhile thing, that if it ever came out of our association of sitting there talking, because we're very free with the way we talk amongst other Masons. You know, we feel free to discuss a lot of things that we would not really want to open that can of worms with another person. So,
but see, and that's a good thing. Like when I first started out in Freemasonry, you know, I grew up in we were poor, that whole thing. But I've always had like a negative mindset as a kid, and then even as an adult, and even in my military career, I always had a negative mindset. You know, I figured if it was going to go wrong for me, it was going to go wrong. It was going to be terrible, and I just kind of accept that fate. But when I got into Freemasonry and I started meeting other men with minds like yours, and other men who were philosophical in their thought, and just I would just hear them talk, it kind of unlocked that part of my brain where I was like, no, that makes sense. Like the ability to sit back and kind of analyze things deeper than just maybe what most people do today on social media. They read the title. That's it. Their whole opinion is based on this, you know, one title. They don't analyze it deeper. And I always accredit Freemasonry to kind of bettering my life, because what it did is it allowed me to look into myself and you know, figure out what I really wanted and what was I doing wrong, or at least what did I feel I was doing wrong, and how to make it better.
yeah.
And I always attribute Masonry itself for introducing me to those moral teachings and to the people themselves, which is kind of what you said earlier. It's about, you know, the people that you meet in Freemasonry.
Yeah.
That really makes the journey worthwhile, because again, my mind frame, it switched, and when I started seeing the difference, you know, a more positive difference, and I was happier, I said, okay, you know, there's really something to this at a more in-depth level, and then that's kind of where you start getting into the higher degrees of Freemasonry. But
what I have found in all my years is that growth as a person is essentially a series of epiphanies. You may go and read a number of books, or you may have a number of experiences that makes you think about something, and you start pulling connections. You start pulling these facts that you know in your brain about your past experience with other people, or things that you've seen happen, or something that somebody's telling you in a book, and you put them together and you coalesce it into a realization that I've been thinking this thing all my life, and in fact, it's this way.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see Masonry as is it's a catalyst to more epiphany. Most of my epiphanies have come from reading books or things like that, and discovering things about myself. And it took years and years, and sometimes it's right in front of your face and you just don't see it until something sparks that interest. And that's what kind of, there's been an escalation or a quickening, if you will, of being able to make realizations, because I'm getting input from people that have been on the road before me, people that are successful at what they do, or successful at curbing their own pride, curbing their own
their ego
fallacies. Yeah, their ego, their human fallacies. They're able to, they're much more further down the road at being able to clean up their act, if you want to put it in a layman's terms.
Well, see, and that's kind of why, like, they always say, like, oh, the Masons, it's just a bunch of like maybe like rich people or whatever. They're just doing business deals with each other and all this, but that's not really true. It's an organization that attracts people who have a certain mindset, and those people, not everyone, but some of them just happen to have a mindset that drove them to success. Yeah. And I enjoy sitting and listening to them, because what you find out is, which is again why I love organizations like Freemasonry, you will not always sit down with someone who was just handed everything on a silver spoon.
Yeah.
Most all these guys have struggled, and they've just overcome adversity after adversity, and they got to where they are. Yeah. Not because they were a Freemason, but just their mindset.
Well, what I do think I can attribute to that is that, we will get every once in a while somebody that comes in there with unstated mercenary motives. Yeah. They think this is going to make them rich.
Yeah. What do they call that? The homie hookup or something like that?
No, I don't know.
Nah, you're not going to get that, bro. Sorry.
But they can get through the door. They can get through the initiation process and all that. But after they realize that this is not something that they're going to necessarily get appointments into the government or anything like that, and they're not going to get money handed to them, that they're just among a lot of people that are self-starters. I mean, that's really, I mean, if I was to...
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, it's, if I was to boil it down to two words, as far as the connecting principle of the men that you meet at Masonry, that they're almost all of them, I mean, I want to say 99.8% are probably all of them self-starters, and Masonry is what they were looking for. They were looking to be a better man.
Yeah.
And for you to even get to that stage, that requires self-starter, because nobody's going to look to be a better man because somebody's pushing them.
Yeah.
They're going to look to be a better man because they're looking at their life and they're not satisfied with who they are, or they kind of happy that they're making some forward progress, but they're not satisfied yet. It's something that Thomas Sowell had said, and I'm going to have to paraphrase because I don't know exactly the wording, but he said, it takes a great deal of knowledge to understand how ignorant you are.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect. And and that's kind of like one of the things I learned about suppressing the ego, being humble.
Yeah.
There's no need to be jealous or envious of what other people have. Mm-hmm. Why not sit down and ask them, how did you get that? Share your story, because you might find out that you guys had the same type of upbringing and things like this, but maybe an opportunity entered their life.
Yep.
And then that maybe you'll look back and you'll be like, you know what? I have met these people, or I have possibly turned down opportunities to kind of pursue the path that I want. But again, like you were saying before, you didn't have the epiphany. You didn't really know at the time. So for me, that's kind of what I love. And it's also just the thirst for knowledge.
Yeah.
I haven't met any Mason from around the world, whether I was there or they were here visiting, or I met them somewhere along the way, who just was not seeking something more.
Right.
And that's where the philosophy and the teachings and meeting the people comes in for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and as a Mason, it's kind of important that you be able to recognize that that thirst for knowledge, it doesn't necessarily come from books. There are Masons that they're very loath to read anything of any serious philosophical bent, but that doesn't mean they don't have a thirst for knowledge. They get their more. It's kind of like we do learn differently. Some people are audio. They can listen to a lecture and they can pick up the concept.
Yeah.
But some people are visual. They have to have something tangible in front of them, and some people cannot grasp something on an aesthetic level. You can explain it to them, but it's not until they put their hands on it that it's going to sink in. So there are some people that they're not interested in a philosophical knowledge. They're interested in hands-on, and you can find them a lot in Shriners. They want to be hands-on in being of service to their fellow man and whatnot, and they're learning by getting out there. And that's not to say that our Shriners do not pick up a book. I mean, there's a lot of people with a philosophical bent, but what you got to do is recognize that just because they're not picking up a book doesn't mean that they're not out thirsting for knowledge. They're getting it from a different avenue. And
Shriners is more of the charity-focused side as compared to a regular, what we call Blue Lodge.
That's right. It's what they call an appendant body, and I think that's something important to Masonry's health is being rounded, being able to have something for every one of those people's interests in going out and doing charity work or the philosophical research and just fellowship in general, to be among like-minded men, to discuss things, to be able to turn each other's minds one way or another towards something closer to the truth,
Yeah, or even some guys when they're having hard times or whatever, it's nice they can go out, do some charity work and share their story or their plight with their fellow brothers who they know aren't going to turn their back or slander them or go posting everything on Facebook about their troubles. And it's a fraternity, but it's such deeper than that. So I always try to explain to people, kind of like I was saying earlier, like if you are the type of person who's kind of wondering, like, kind of what else is out there, what's going on, if you like to sit and think a little bit more in depth, if you enjoy philosophy, it's definitely an organization to check out. But also, if you're just looking to try to better yourself and figure out these things,
I mean,
as like a starting point, kind of where I was, it's.
That's really something that historically Masonry was there for, is for someone who is seeking. They're not someone who's just like, well, I got an extra Tuesday
I could go
free. I've been looking for a place to go drinking or whatever. It was like, no, that's not quite what happened. What's going on here?
And that's I like what you were saying earlier about there are people with nefarious intentions that will try to join lodges, but they don't last, because they're going to realize, like, again, if you're here from some journal trying to get the scoop on some sort of a satanic ritual that goes on, like, you're going to be heartbroken. You're wasting your money.
And it doesn't even have to go so far as nefarious. It can be just misguided.
Mhm.
I mean, just, and that's honestly whenever I'm talking to somebody that I'm supposed to be getting an idea of them
Mhm.
before we vote on them, the first question I ask is, "What do you think Masonry is?" Because their answer will tell me whether they put any thought into it or what
Yeah.
exactly they're walking into. If they tell me, "Well, I don't know, my friend Bob said," I'll say,
Yes,
"Well,
yeah.
you probably don't want to make this kind of commitment."
Yeah.
So,
And for me, I don't like when people tell me like, "Oh, I was asked to be I was asked to come and join and whatever." I don't, because I don't ask people, because I don't think someone should be asked. I think it's something that if it comes up in a conversation, you talk about it, I will invite them,
yeah.
but I will never ask them if they want to be a member. That's always weird to me.
Well, as a general rule, most people that know me don't know I'm a Mason.
Hmm.
My own daughters did not know I was a Mason until the night I was installed as master.
So what did they think?
I invited them.
Where's he going?
Yeah, I told them, hey, I'm getting installed as the head of this nonprofit that I've been involved in. I want to invite you down here, and they were at the installation.
I bet they were like, "What?"
Yeah.
What?
So I mean, yeah,
Wait, I gotta know how you kept that secret for. Oh my God.
well,
How
I
many
mean,
years?
it just
Or not
doesn't come up.
secret, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it just doesn't come up. I mean, it's for. I mean, well, I mean, I did. I have. This is just kind of joke. So don't take this as an indication of my thought process or whatever. But I have had times when, for instance, people knew that I was going to a funeral. I was in a suit, and they're like, "Well, is this somebody you're related to?" And I have to tell them, "Well, yeah, I belong to I'm running a branch of a nonprofit, and one of the duties that we provide is if one of our members dies, we'll do the eulogy. It's the job of the head of that particular branch, and I'm the head of that particular branch." And they go, "Oh, what nonprofit is this?" And I go, "Oh, I'm a member of the He-Man Women Haters Club."
Yeah, I like that.
And they're like, "Oh, well, don't tell me."
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, it's so when somebody comes to me and what happens, the closest thing I come to inviting or suggesting it to somebody is when I'm in a conversation with them and I hear from the conversation that they're questioning the direction of their life. They're questioning, there's got to be something more to this than just going to work and working for 30 years and then coming out the other end and going, well, what the heck did I do? I mean, did I change anything? Did in all my work, did it amount to a hill of beans as far as people around me? That's the big part of the catchphrase. The people around me, the world, society in general. Did I do anything that made an impact to make? Is the world a better place because I'm in it, or would it ever made a difference? When that kind of thought process starts coming into the conversation, and I'm hearing this, that's when I start asking them questions that will kind of bring out, are they really looking for what Masonry's offering? And then I'll reveal, hey, there is an organization. You can read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. He alludes to it when he talks about I think it's the Free Thinkers Society. It's like men that can sit there and talk to each other about, and they all have this common bond of they're basically God-fearing men or whatever. I said, yeah, and that's something I've been involved in, and I think maybe you might benefit from it. If you do, let me know. I'll make an introduction. You
Yeah.
can feel it out.
No, and that's a good way to do it too. Yeah.
I think so. I mean, and it's very rare that I've made that offer to anybody. So, yeah, it's there is a reason, a very ingrained within Masonry's, I don't want to call it psyche, but it's makeup, that prohibits us from recruiting, because you have to be at a certain stage in your life before you can really benefit from what it's teaching.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of like for me,
Yeah.
at that point
Yeah.
in time, I decided, to pursue it.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, you'll see people of all ages kind of joining.
Yeah.
Guys who are like, I've been interested for a long time, but was just so busy, didn't have the time,
Yeah.
The family and whatever. Maybe they're 66 years old now and they want to be a member.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, the epiphany can come to you at any time, any moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are the people that you want to be around, because they're the ones who self-starters. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're self-starters in their own improvement as well as in everything else, and that's why you'll notice that people that whatever they're sent out to do, they're successful at what they do because, well, first and foremost, I mean, you got to give credit to God. I mean, you're successful because God grants you the ability, but from a earthly corporeal standpoint, if you're trying to isolate the key ingredient of all these men, they're self-starters. That's how the mechanism got started. It's they at work, at home, as a man, they are continually seeking more, to be more, not necessarily to have more, to be more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I love people who want to change the world, but I always ask them, you want to change everything around you, but have you looked inside yourself,
right,
and changed what you need internally, to then in turn change the environment around you? Because you're not going to change the environment around you if you don't change yourself first. Because that's something that I had to learn, again, through my journey of meeting people through Freemasonry and all this. Because it's just, in my opinion, if you're a negative person, you're not a self-starter, you don't think you can do things, until you get rid of that mindset, you can't do anything outside. You can't. It's just not going to... You might start it, but you're not going to follow through.
Also, one of the things that hinder us is our human frailties, our faults. So, not to say that you got to rid yourself of all your faults before you can really see the world around you for what it is, but it helps if you can see yourself for who you really are.
Yeah.
Before you can begin to see what the world really is. And I'll give you one example. Is one of the epiphanies that I've had is in life is my ability to no longer see things as stemming from malice, but stemming from just that's the way things are. Such as, I mean, there was a time when someone would cut me off on the freeway or whatever, and it would ruin my whole day because I would be pissed off about it for hours and stretching into the evening, and but then when I started looking at my own mistakes, and that was something that I used to be proud of when I was a young kid and in my 20s. I prided myself on being able to recognize people's personalities, their flaws, what drove them, and as someone trying to be a psychologist or whatever, that's that's not a bad ability to be able to assess somebody, but where my greatest, what I would still count as one of my the greatest blessing I had was when I started being able to see my own faults, when I started to be able to see where I was doing things that if I were in the same situation, I'd be like, what the heck is wrong with you? And so after that, after I got a grip on that, when somebody would, invariably, when somebody would do something on the freeway that irritated me, they're like, why the heck did he do that? Like, invariably, like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes later, by pure accident, I will do the same thing to somebody else. And I realized over time, hey, when you assume just mistake rather than malice, you're going to be right more often than you. And once you do that, you can look at people and not be so angry about how the world necessarily is. Life is not going to be perfect. It's intention. It's the people that do things out of greed, malice, and just these are the people that you got to worry about, but not the average person who just simply does something that he doesn't really understand. And if you can make that room for other people's mistakes, life gets to be a lot more able to be lived.
Yeah, I
enjoyed.
I've had similar epiphanies to that, where, again, you start realizing like that people are human. They make mistakes. I don't know what's going on in their life or that day. I don't know what happened. Maybe their mind is somewhere else. Doesn't make sense for me to waste my energy putting all this negativity out there, because clearly they probably have a lot of negativity going on at that moment in time. So no one else needs that. I don't need that. I got other things to do. I'm trying to live, as stress-free as, I possibly can. But I like that you brought up the malice and the greed. One of the things that I always tell people when it comes to things like policy, and not like politics in the sense of the political parties, but everyone wants to fight for this thing and that thing and this thing, and they fight back and forth. But one thing I always look at is I try to take into account those root things that really drove the policy development and how it's going to go through committees. Ego, greed, and I still believe that humans have a tribalistic mindset. Your tribe is your family. Yeah, you as a person might want to feed the poor, but if you can create legislation or do things to give your family or friends a benefit over those poor people, that's the harder thing. So when I'm trying to come up with a testimony or in support or opposing some sort of legislation, I try to throw that factor in. I try to think of who the introducer of that piece of legislation is, who are like their donors, who are their family, who is this going to impact, in a more direct sense, so then I can develop my argument, because it's going to address maybe, let's just say, homelessness, but okay, where really is this money going to? Who's in, I don't know. That's just my thought process.
What I mean, to take it not too far down the rabbit hole, but what I see on problems in the world or whatever, I believe, I would hypothesize that the majority of problems that we face societally, as a society, is the result of legislation with unintended consequences. I recall there was one piece of a bill that in my office we wanted to address something, and I asked permission to write the bill because I wanted the experience. And when I wrote it, it was very hard, because the main thing that I had to look at was, when I write this and I give this judge power to do this thing, what are all the possible ways that they can game this.
Yeah.
And do something egregious to somebody simply because it's the easiest thing for them
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here trying to write this thing so narrowly, so that they cannot go this route. The thing that they can order, the thing that they can do in this instance, cannot become an unjust. That's
Yeah.
when we're talking about justice. That's that understanding of right and wrong that enables us to render unto everybody their just due without distinction.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've heard that somewhere before,
Yeah.
but it's so when I'm trying to write this bill, I'm like, okay, the concept of this bill is to put somebody right and stop a process that people are doing to deny people what is due to them. But I don't want this judge to be able to say, okay, well, you know what? I'm just gonna blanket write this thing
Yeah.
off so that not only are you going to pay back and force this person to make restitution, but I'm going to commit an injustice against them on top of it. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, that's not what we're looking for. So yeah,
But I see, but I think in terms of like with that, it's like kind of understanding that no human is perfect.
well, you got to take. I mean, that is.
I think that would make a lot of people's lives easier, though, especially when they're like debating online or arguing. Like,
Right.
just understand, like, you both have probably misinterpreted the argument completely,
Yeah.
and it's just. I don't know how to say it. Like, I just feel like if you just kind of like take a step back and maybe ask a question instead of throwing an attack.
The one political party that I actually do belong to is something called No Labels, and I've belonged to this for. I think it was within a year of their creation, which was like that had to be before 2007. Well, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
As a matter of fact, I think that was, it had to be before 2007. But anyway, they're the ones. They have something called a Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a group of 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats in the Congress that tackle things. When you're talking about the infrastructure bill, the 3.5 trillion one that they actually got the president to back and kind of narrows everything down to what they're agreeing is infrastructure or whatever, and saying, okay, well, you can deal with all those other side issues in another bill or later, but let's get this ball rolling. So
Yeah.
these 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans, they're the ones that drew that thing up. Now they have postings on Facebook or whatever, and it comes up on my feed, and I look at the conversations that come up when they're
Well, like the comments.
yeah, well, they're putting on a poll. Hey, do you believe that we should address this without a reconciliation or bill or whatever? And the comments after that are not. Some people are having an intelligent conversation, but most of it is not constructive at all.
Yeah.
It is quite simply, these guys are nothing but a tool for the Democratic Party. And literally, I mean, I've seen this on more than one post. Immediately after it, you're wrong. They're a tool for the Republicans.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you both see the exact opposite from the same
Yeah.
piece of work? It's like, wow, yeah, it goes back to that concept. We're not talking to each other anymore. We're simply and I've said this for over a decade. We have people, political pundits, political operatives in the media they really see their job is to stir people up.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if you're talking about Rush Limbaugh, Rachel Maddow, talking about Chris Matthews or Bill Maher or any one of them on either side of the. They do not want to come out there and tell you, well, you know, that both the Republicans and the Democrats, they're really getting this stuff done, and they're just no, that doesn't get them airtime. They will paint things with broad brushstrokes and not look at the details of things because they want you to be angry.
Yeah.
And it's, in
Fear
my
porn.
opinion, tearing this nation asunder.
Yeah.
So the problem is we're not looking at things with a critical eye. We're not listening to what we're hearing and saying, no, that's not true. You're saying that this is this, but that doesn't jive.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
And it scares me because the lack of critical thinking.
Yep.
And it's a conversation I had with Alfonso Braggs on my last podcast I did. The lack of critical thinking is it's disturbing when you try to think about the future of a nation that's, you know, if you don't have people who are going to sit down and debate and do the critical thinking and the analyses, you're just going to get, I don't know, a bunch of emotionally driven pieces of legislation that, and I just don't see how that's that better. Because in my opinion, and the overall tie into things is, we are so advanced as a species today, technologically and in terms of society. We have the knowledge, like you said, at our fingertips, in our pocket.
Yep.
We have the ability to change the lives of every single human. And I don't care about what Jeff Bezos and these other billionaires do with their money. Because these guys were cranking out, you know, hard work, you know, building their empires. We could talk about the wages and all that. But we have the ability to change the life of every human being on this planet for the better.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, again, it goes back to like the human ego and the tribalistic, you know, mindset that humans still have, whether they want to admit it or not. It's just, we're stuck in like a purgatory.
Well, yeah, people are afraid of change. They're afraid of that when they go through that change, they're gonna, the things that they rely on are no longer going to be there.
Yeah.
And we are, I mean, as human beings, that's part of our strategy to rise above where we are. I mean, most people out there go through a period of struggle, especially right after, whether it's high school or college or whatever. They're trying to make their name for themselves. They're not necessarily making a whole lot of money, and they're having to pay that sweat equity and that money for the things like a home or whatever that they need to make a stable life for themselves and their kids and all that, and so we're part of our strategy is to be able to get a routine or get something that we can rely on, a job or a profession, a community, any one of a number of things. We try to get something going that we can rely on and know that this is going to be part of our vehicle to get us further. And then we are very afraid that something is going to come along and affect that. It's going to end that, and this thing that you put in place and set aside, and you don't have to think about it. It's just there, and you can rely on it. Now something's threatening that, and you're like, well, yeah, I don't think so.
It's like, no.
Yeah.
Which kind of, one thing that, if you still have time, I've been fascinated by the the World War II, like I mentioned earlier before the podcast, and Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an interesting history about Freemasonry. And if you could kind of like indulge myself and whoever might listen about him, like, but attacking or shutting down the lodges or capturing Freemasons or.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're during that time, you're talking about a leader who was very paranoid about his power, and he was talking to something. I'm not coining this term. This is actually a term from a very good, an old and very informative book on Weimar Germany and the rise of Nazism, and the title of it was The Politics of Cultural Despair. And that's what drove Hitler to power. He had a nation that was in despair. Their whole way of life was just turned upside down. The after World War I, the penalties laid on them, the economic and all this, they just didn't see a way out. And what he did was he found someone he could blame. And he blamed the Jewish people. He blamed other nations. Just anything that he knew he could get them behind him because they could be, well, he's speaking our truth.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those kind of perfect storm scenarios where there was a book or a pamphlet, or I've never read it. I'm vaguely familiar with it, but it was called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yes, and because that was what generated all of it. It was a book that erroneously suggested that Masons were essentially the tool or the
that's right.
force, the muscle behind a conspiracy of the Zionist nation or the Jewish people or whatever to not control the world, but keep people down, keep people like the German people down. And a lot of people believed in this thing. Now, I mean, I feel silly just saying this, but what I am is I'm actually quoting some of the texts, which one of them being Freemasonry for Dummies will tell you this, was that historians have discovered that it was actually put out by the Russian police. I don't know if that's the GRU or whatever it is. This was, I think, pre-KGB or something like this. But, I mean, I have no reason to I mean, it sounds silly to me, but we sort of deal with that in our own day, don't we? But so supposedly they were the ones that had put it out. But irrespective of who put it out, it was essentially just a complete work of fiction trying to parade as nonfiction. And once again, I think we come back to that concept of people's inability to look at things with a critical eye, and believing things that aren't necessarily true. They don't apply a hypothesis, or if they have a hypothesis that, okay, this is correct, they don't know how to create tests to prove whether it's right or not, or whether it will pass the any kind of test.
Well, but also I think it's if you're trying to take over, you don't want anyone possibly meeting in secret, especially if Freemasons and the history with the founding of the United States, right? So.
Well, so he believed this, or at least he wanted the people to believe this. I'm sure Goebbels probably put this out there as fast as he could have a printing press running it out there. So When it came time for Hitler to enact what he called his final solution, where he was creating the concentration camps and he was putting the Jewish people in there, but he was also putting in political prisoners. Anybody that disagreed with him, or he identified as having what he wanted to call subversive views or whatever, he was putting them in there. Now, we all know about the gold star, Star of David, that marked a Jewish prisoner in a concentration camp. Well, political prisoners that he put in concentration camps wore a red triangle. This marked them as not being there for being Jewish, but they were a political prisoner. Well, he rounded up Masons. He because of the protocols of Zion, and possibly for the reason that you're talking about. You're talking about, when it comes to Masons, you're talking about people that don't necessarily they tend to look at things with a critical eye.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily, they probably did not just go along with the hate speech and the politics of cultural despair. They probably were not as Masons per se, but people who were Masons on their own, because we know that lodges do not get involved in politics. They don't direct their people to do anything for any political reasons. They just
it's not really the purpose.
We're just people who we talk to one another, and we have a fundamental set of principles that guide us in our relationships with the other human beings or whatever. And so we're going to tend to be the people that go out there and say, oh, okay, well, this is very unjust.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do something about it as a man. And, of course, when I'm doing it, of course, I've got friends from Masonry that are going to do the same thing. So I'm sure they probably put a little resistance to him coming up the political power chain or whatever. But he put Masons in the concentration camps, and that's where they were until liberation.
And that's interesting, because I didn't even know that. Now I know that Masonic lodges kind of shut down and went like in ground. They didn't display the symbol.
Yes,
but they're still meeting, which is fascinating to me, because I don't know.
That's they could no longer wear the square and compass. Mm-hmm. So what they came up with, it was the forget-me-not. Mm-hmm. They would wear a forget-me-not on their lapel, and that was their secret symbol that, hey, I'm a Mason, and only Masons knew about it. So that has become a symbol of not only Masons at that time, but our ability to overcome persecution, because that's going to happen when you keep things secret. And we have to keep things secret because the secrets that we have are really meant for those people that are coming in. When they go through the ceremonies and they go through our rituals, we want them to have an impact. We want them to we don't want them to say, oh, well, that's what that looked like when I read it or whatever. They want to, you want them to hear it and learn the lesson that you're trying to teach them.
Well, it's like I always tell people, a lot of things we don't talk about, again, like you were saying, it's to have an impact on you. If you join, like that's for you. You're joining this organization because you're seeking something, and that's for you on purpose. People practice these ceremonies for you, for the individual, and I compare it to like a surprise birthday party. Like, do you want to know that next Saturday at 6 you're having a surprise birthday party and everyone that's going to be there and all the gifts you're going to get? No, because that's not something that will impact your life, because you know.
Yeah.
Right? Now when you show up there and you have that surprise birthday party and you see your friends and your family and
And it
things.
evokes an emotion.
Yes.
An emotional response, a pleasurable emotional response. And
Yeah.
it's one of those truths of life. I think it was might have been Eleanor Roosevelt said it. Said people will forget what you said. People will even forget what you did. People will never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And that cuts both ways. If you make somebody feel small, they're going to remember that forever.
Yeah. Oh.
That is internalized. I mean, the very fact that they felt it within themselves, by its definition, is they've internalized it.
Yeah.
But if you make somebody feel like they're a winner, like they are somebody who has value in this world, that they're appreciated, and that all their hard work for on anything wasn't just overlooked or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to remember that forever.
Yeah.
And that's going to change their life. That's one of the ways that you change the world. You change the life of people around you by making their lives better.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's kind of, for living in Hawaii, that's what I always learned. I was told when I started learning more about the Hawaiian culture, whatever.
Yeah.
I was lectured by William Sousa.
Uh-huh.
You know him?
Name sounds familiar, but I'm sure as we get discussing it, I'm going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
what is that? No,
He's in the Royal Order of Kamehameha.
Oh, okay.
He helps organize all the ceremonies and stuff. Hawaiian guy, white hair.
Yeah,
Love him.
yeah, I remember seeing him. Yeah,
Yeah, he always told me. He would say, he would say, stop being dumb. It's not about what people think of you, like what you did or what you said. Just like the quote, he said it's about how you make them feel.
yeah.
Because when I was running for office, he was like, you need to touch them. You need to shake their hand. You need to grab their elbow. You need to do something, say something, and just be like real. And just know that moment, how they feel with you, is what they're always going to remember.
Right.
And that's like what you were saying is if you could you could change somebody's life by making them feel good. Because I mean, honestly, like, what are people doing every day? They're trying to do things to make themselves feel better.
Yeah.
And if you can surround yourself with people that they want to feel fulfilled. Yes.
They want to feel like their life has some meaning. And everybody has gone through the stages in their life where they're become aware of their singularity, their conscience within them. They realize, I'm looking out from this body, and you're looking out from your body. I cannot look out from yours. I have a single conscience that has a finite period of time on this world, and how am I going to feel at the end of it? Will I feel like I just wasted it, or and more on a smaller level, am I going to feel like I wasted the last year of my life, or am I going to feel like I wasted this last week or whatever? So
that's why I kind of look back at like 2020, like with COVID, and I try to figure out how I feel about it still, because I don't feel like I accomplished a few things, get my master's degree and things like this, but I hope other people don't feel so down and out because of COVID, or how it impacted them negatively, because there's always a way out, I feel.
It's it's cliche to say this too will pass, but after so many years of living and all that, you got to be able to look back and realize, number one, in your human nature, it is human nature, that we have had times when we thought, okay, this is it. man, my life is over.
Yeah.
This is, and when something dramatic happens to us that threatens our way of life, the first thing we do is we start running through our minds the worst case scenarios.
That is true.
We do, and it is so rare that worst case scenario comes to fruition. So we have to realize, we have to be able to take those life lessons and say, okay, well, I have to control my human nature, that tendency to hypothesize the worst case scenario and believe it, and make decisions based on, okay, well, my life is over. What are you? Well, no, you've been here before. You know the way out. The first way out is get a no BS assessment of your situation, because that is going to tell you where you are, and then you got to decide where you need to go and what are the steps from getting from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it sounds simplistic, but you know from past experience, that's how you did it.
Well,
that's
so,
how you.
And that's kind of, again, giving the credits to the Freemasonry and opening up my thought processes. I used to be the kind of person that if something went wrong, instead of just tackling it head on right then, or if I messed up, I would try to hide it. I would dodge from it. I would try to run away from it.
Yeah.
But then you're just dragging it out longer, and it's more painful. But you just suck it up, and if you mess up and you just kind of own up, you fess up to it, and you just, I guess, try to right the ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
well, what I have come to believe, you may think it crazy, but I believe pretty much everything, every struggle you have is honestly a test. How do you react to it? We can have great principles, but it's how we apply it when it's not convenient for us.
Yeah.
And that's just it. As part of maturity is, I mean, we all have those stages where, as a young person, you have something go wrong, and you're building up in your mind, oh man, they're gonna tear me a new one for this. I'm gonna lose everything I've worked for. So you're like, man, how can I make this go away? And honestly, it's when you get older, you start to realize, well, you know what? That's part of the concept of self-accountability, the concept of courage, courage to stand up and take consequences sometimes and pay the price, and it's not easy, but it is one of those things that after you've had enough epiphanies and had enough realizations that, okay, well, this is the way to go. This is the easy way, and the adult way is not. It's very funny. They never coincide. They never. Easy never seems to come into adult life.
And as long as you understand too, like that, you're not the only one who's had these kind of issues.
Yeah.
Again, I think it goes into suppressing your ego and just sucking it up and saying, "Yeah, I might look bad to people for a while, but people forget." Or not forget, but it's not something they'll necessarily worry about.
It seems like it's the most important thing in the world right now, but it's in the long run. As a matter of fact, I will say that it's a funny story touching on Masonry. Is I have a friend from Augsburg, Germany, Mason that visited the lodge, and that's the other beauty of Masonry is you're not talking about your community, guys that you meet in your community. You're not talking about even guys that you meet in your country. You're talking about people that you meet from the world.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend in Florence. I have a friend in Augsburg, Germany. I got a friend working in the Czech Republic. I have a great number of friends in Tahiti. I have a number of friends in Paris, in Marseille, all over the world, all because of Masonry.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were sitting down and he was discussing. My friend from Germany. He was discussing their history, and he said, "Well, I don't really think that there's ever going to come a time when we're going to be able to get past our history of the time during World War II and the Nazism." And I said, "Well, something you got to realize is when you look at the long run of history, what usually happens is you and your former enemies wind up with a mutual enemy yourself,
Yeah.
a situation or a aggressor outside of it." And I told him, "Well, there could become a world event where we're all united against a common foe." And I said, in all honesty, I kind of think worldwide terrorism is probably where
Yeah.
that's going to happen in the future. And to a degree, I think that has happened within Europe. I think Europe, in a large part, got a little more united around fighting international terrorism. So, yeah, the things may seem like I said, it's the most important thing in the world, and you're going to forever be known for this. But no, that's not the way it happens.
Yeah.
You know.
And I like that you brought up the friends from all over the world, yeah, because I used to live in Brazil.
Yep.
And I would go to lodges in Rio de Janeiro, and then I also lived in Sao Paulo for a while.
Yeah.
We'd go to lodges there every Friday in an area called Liberdade, which is it's Japanese. Mm-hmm. It's like the largest population of Japanese outside of Japan. So it was very cool. Yeah, I used to go to the lodges there like every Friday night. And it's interesting because I connected through someone in Rio through a website, our Facebook page, Masonic Vibes. I just posted on there, I'm coming to Rio, if there's any brothers. And this one guy didn't live too far. When I got to Brazil, he took me, drove me around. He took me to his lodge. I went there. It was awesome. Same as Sao Paulo. When I was going to Sao Paulo, I linked up with another guy. Again, took me around, took me to lodge. It's a worldwide organization that I think is closer than other organizations in a sense of like the bond.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, to me, that has always fascinated me.
Yeah.
And you could go most any place in the world and find a Masonic lodge, from a small town to a big city, except for a few, probably like, I don't know, probably Iran, maybe China. They might exist, but you might not be able to find them yourself. Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing is it is officially illegal in Iran, but it actually reportedly exists somewhere in there. And if I did know anything about it, I couldn't say it. But the fact of it is, I just hear stories.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's I hear the same. Yeah, about like Iran, other countries. I don't want to say.
Yeah. So it's
what I love about it though is, it just gives hope, because there are people in these oppressed countries that are still willing to just put their neck on the line, and they're meeting and they're discussing, advancement of themselves and mankind in general. And that's kind of like, it just goes to show like I guess the tenacity of the organization itself, if that's.
Yeah, I mean, we go back to that forget me not.
Yeah.
I mean, that is we talk about persecution of Masons, the papal bulls that have actually ordered up to and including death for Catholics who are Masons and wouldn't renounce their membership and things like that. But we've had persecutions as recently as the 80s. There was a book came out, I think it was called The Brotherhood, that painted a picture of English Masonry as English government as being rife with Masons who were doing each other favors and things like that. And this caused a firestorm in England. And there was actually a period of time where it was officially parliamentary enacted legislation that they were, or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't necessarily that it was law. It was policy within the government that if you were a Mason, you had to inform your supervisor, and they were questioning them a market list of things, and the Grand Lodge of England actually had to take it to the courts and laid it out that just like anybody else, we have the right of free association, and they're trying to make their argument for why they need that, and they said, well, there is the perception, and they said, whoa, if you're gonna outlaw us from service in government, or you're gonna outlaw us from, or you're gonna take our jobs, or anything like that, simply because we're Masons, you better have something more than the perception.
Yeah. Well, there's a perception of the government's corrupt.
Yeah. So yeah. So
I mean,
it's all part of being an unknown. People fear the unknown. So, but I would not advocate allowing people to or advocate lifting our silence over our rituals, simply because it would be at the end of the core of what we are. That ability to make an impact on somebody and make them see themselves for who they are, and see that their relationship with man and that they have a duty to all mankind to practice charity and their faith and do something more than just stand on the sidelines and watch the world and their community fall by the wayside.
Yeah.
You got to get out and be a better man and do something.
like have a sense of duty.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to take up too much of your time, like I said before,
Yeah.
but I do. So, Freemasonry, it's an all men's organization, but I think what people really tend to not realize is that the women have an organization too, the Eastern Star. Now that's for women related to Masons, though. Yeah, but I just felt like it's important to point that out because, a lot of people will criticize Freemasonry. Oh, how come you don't have women? How come women ain't allowed? Blah blah blah. But it's like, well, they have their own. It's just it's a traditional thing, and
Well, it's it really boils down to, I think, as I see it, and this is not official policy among Masonry or anything like that. It's just this is how I've seen it. Is the organization, the history and everything the work we've put into it is the ability to make a better man. And as I said before, men and women, they complement each other. They have different strengths and weaknesses. And I would be no better able to tell a woman what makes her a better woman than one may be to understand the difference between a man and a boy. I mean, I would lay it out there that the difference between a man and a boy is a man has adult responsibilities and he meets them. And let me say that again. He meets them. A boy, he has responsibilities like mowing the lawn or whatever, but nothing he does in his given day, if he doesn't do it, somebody's going to starve.
Yeah.
Or somebody's going to, some great injustice is going to befall somebody or whatever. A man has this weight on him that a boy doesn't. Well, we as Masons have practiced and have studied and all this to look at what makes a good man and what can make him better and what. But we haven't studied anything about what can make a woman better. And I mean, that's just it's like saying to me, it's like saying, okay, well, the local swimmers club doesn't train the local track team.
Yeah,
well,
no,
that's
exactly.
not our specialty. That's not what we know.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing that the government nor Masonry nor any of that is ever saying that the anybody interested in what makes a woman better or anything like that can start their own
Exactly.
organization or whatever. It's just historically this one was created, and we've followed it to shift gears. We would be giving some people some very bad advice because we don't know.
Yeah, you're like,
we
"What?"
just we know what we appreciate, but there's so much that makes a woman great that we appreciate that they do under the radar that we don't pay attention to. It's kind of like you don't want to see the wizard behind the curtain is because they one of the things I've learned over my life, and it took a lot of knowledge to realize the extent of my previous ignorance, but I think women are more intelligent about relationships than men are. Out of necessity, a woman will have a lot more on the line, being more. When they get into a relationship, they can be hurt a lot more than men tend to be. Mm-hmm. So they have grown to. That's one of their strengths. They can see things in relationships a lot of times that we don't see.
Yeah.
And I can't tell them how to do that. That's the magic that they have created over centuries and eons or whatever. That they've got this skill.
Yeah.
You know?
No, they do. These women. That's and there's always these arguments about the men and the women, and I just appreciate the evolutionary difference, the creation difference. Mm-hmm. And the trait difference, like you said, the characteristics, the skill set difference. I think there's a reason that subconsciously we name all the important things, Mother Earth, if your vehicle, which is precious, it's always a female name.
Yeah.
Anything that's close to a guy's like heart or character is always named after a female. And it's not because some sexualization in that sense, like a fantasy. It's been
ingrained in us,
in
our culture. I think where we went off the rails was when we, in our paternalism, we not us as Masons or whatever, but as mankind, we painted the female of the species as inferior.
Oh yeah.
That was a tragic road to go down, because I'm sure that has led to a lot of suffering. That's led to a lot of injustice,
Mm-hmm.
but we got to be careful that we don't throw the pendulum in a equally violent
Yeah.
direction. We got to see things for what they are. That's but
And that kind of circles right back to the critical thinking.
yeah,
Like you can't
yeah,
just
it does.
no, we're
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
No, you're not. You're women. We have to appreciate those. But I just
Well,
want to
With
uh,
one last thing on that subject before we
mhm.
go or move on to anything else. There was a reporter, a woman. I have a great deal of respect for her rigor as a journalist. She actually did an experiment for like a year. She became a man, not surgically, but
Mhm.
she dressed as a man, and she attended a lot of the men's therapy things and whatnot.
Oh wow.
And one of the things that she said, speaking to your our ingrained respect for the woman, the mother figure, or
Mhm.
whatever. She said, "I didn't realize how good we had it." As she said, if you are a woman and you're walking down a busy sidewalk, um, and you stop, people will go around you. People will get out of your way.
Mhm.
If you are a man and you walk down a busy sidewalk and you stop, they will run over you.
Yeah, get
And she,
the hell out the way.
yeah, she experienced that. She just by nature, we will um, we will make more accountants for um, not hurting a woman, not disrespecting or not uh, causing injury to a woman. Whereas a man, hey, you had a 50-50 proposition when
Yeah.
you stepped on this earth. If you can't keep up with the with,
I
with
like
the
that though.
with the way of life, then you need to step off the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's kind of true though, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of more the survival of the fittest type mindset for
Well,
guys.
it's part of whether we want to accept this fact or not. One of the big factors of being um, uh, what when you're talking about a scale of manhood or whatever, strength is always going to be primary, and that's because of our duties to our mates and our
Mm.
children and all that. We tend to have less empathy, but more strength. A mother, what one of the qualities that will um, uh, make her more valuable as a mother in people's eyes, or as a woman in other people's eyes, is the concepts of nurturing, the concepts of empathy. But strength is not necessarily when we're talking physical strength as
Yeah.
opposed to inner strength to be able to um, make sacrifice for her and or her family, her children, and all that.
Oh yeah.
That's and men too. That's one of those things that we do all share. That inner strength to sacrifice our time, our futures, our dreams for the um, uh, benefit of our offspring and sometimes society in general or things like that. That's something we share.
And you see, like, and some people, they'll, you know, when it comes to the discussions about like the male and female, I think if we, I always think about the duality and the
Mm-hmm.
difference. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the male, female, light, dark, black, white, up, down,
Mm-hmm.
as above, so below type,
Mm-hmm.
those types of things. So I see, like you're saying, the women and the men, they complement one another.
Mm-hmm.
You need both of them. Now, maybe, because in my opinion, maybe it's not an opinion, maybe it's true, I don't know, but society advances way faster due to technology and things than people evolve. Humans don't evolve. So people will argue, I don't really want to get into too much of it, but the differences, the makeup of the body of the man and women when it comes to sports, and but women work too, and blah blah blah. Yeah, okay, but predominantly in the past, as we've evolved, men were the hunters and such like that. Not in every culture, but you can go to other cultures and find women that are, a more athletic build and things like that. So I guess in our society, in a Western society, the bodies haven't, I guess, evolved with society in a sense that people would like them to be today, which they seem to want equal bone structure, equal fast twitch muscles, equal, But for me, humans don't evolve that fast. Society is way more ahead than we are physically in a sense of what people want.
Well, I mean,
or think they want.
Well, I think we are making a mistake as society to think that we can make everything homogenous.
Yeah.
There is going to be difference. It's your ability to accept difference, not your ability to erase difference. It's and one of the I will add something to that in that I think our evolution or our growth as society also has to include our appreciation for difference.
Yeah.
What a boring world this would be if everybody spoke the same language, looked the same.
Come on. What if we were all just eating pork chops, man? Like, that's it. That's the food of the people because we're all just one. You gotta have
it's
the differences.
It's that really I think is where your injustices and your true mindset problems is linked, is when we think that there is a standard, there is a one perfect type of being or whatever, and anybody that is not that is inferior. So we don't want to turn around and try and create one superior being that everybody is like. No, you just need to back up and say, hey, there is no superior one type of being. We have to say, okay, well, we have all these differences, and that's fantastic. The fact that we can go out and speak to somebody that has a different take on things because their culture, when you go to Paris, they do things so differently. And I'm not going to tell you that it's superior. I mean, well, you look at like London. When I went to London, you hardly have any cars in London town. They have cordon pricing. They have, because quite frankly, you can travel on the subway, you can travel on the bus, you can travel all these different, but that's because starting in 1899, that's when they dug their first subway tunnel.
Wow.
They've been building this thing for over 100 years, and so they are at that stage where they don't need a car necessarily inside of London, except for police cars and taxis, and
I love that.
And that works for them. There is nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with the way we are right now. Where we run into the problems is where we try to say, okay, well, that's what they're doing, so we need to do that right now. Well, you got about 100 years worth of work that you got to do before you can be there.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with necessarily where you are. You may like to go that direction or whatever, but and the thing is, the fact that you can go somewhere and see how somebody else does something different and say, hey, that's great. It's great to see that. And not necessarily say, okay, well, we have to do that over here now.
I
It's
think of
nice
it-
to see things different.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
I think of it like again, going back to what you were saying about each state is its own country.
Yeah.
I love
Mhm.
that. It's different. I would hate, at least me now at this point in time in this life and reality that I'm living in,
Mhm.
I would hate to think that one day, like the gray aliens that they talk about,
Yeah.
that's the future humans who are coming back because they're so curious how we could all have been so different at one time. Because imagine you're a gray alien
Yeah.
and everyone's the same. You're all bland.
Yeah.
You're all intelligent. Okay, you die. Now, what if reincarnation is true? And now you circle back and you're like, wait, it's like deja vu every day because everything's the same. I would hate that. I would hate that. So just at a chance the reincarnation is true and I would come back and live another life on this planet and in this reality and timeline and such and such, I would really hate for everyone to be the same. There'd be no difference. I want there to be the amazing football players, like on the Pittsburgh Steelers, soon to be 7-time champions. Like I want them to be incredible athletes. I'm not an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
I couldn't be on the Steelers, and I appreciate that. I also can't be Neil deGrasse Tyson
Yeah.
because he's so intelligent,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that. And I appreciate all those differences
Yep.
that everyone has.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's
The one thing I would like to see the same is a basic standard of understanding of how to treat each other.
yeah, or like
That-
morality.
Yeah, I mean, and when I say morality, I'm not necessarily talking about some of the social morality of okay, well, I the belief that okay, well, it's kind of hard to pull something out of the hat here. You know,
I just appreciate differences.
I think the underlying principle of love your fellow man as yourself, or I mean to treat other people the same way in a similar situation that you want to be treated. I mean, it boils down to that. In that for us to actually think about how somebody else is going to feel about something we're doing or the way we're talking to them or something like that and not, but it's not something we're ever going to see in our lifetime, but it would be nice if we valued that.
Yeah.
And that's why if I were to lay some concept or one specific thing down that is why Masons are linked worldwide, is Masons all have at least the training, the exposure to that idea of universally doing to others as in similar circumstances you would have them do to you. So when I'm going over to Paris and meeting some of the Masons over there or Tahiti or whatever, I know that they at least have some value for that basic core concept.
Yeah.
And that's it.
You're not just going to walk into somewhere and the attitudes are completely different, in a sense.
Yeah.
So I guess if anyone were listening to this that is not a Mason, that was interested in joining but still kind of nervous, would you have anything to kind of encourage them?
I mean, if something we were talking about or something that you read as far as specifically what you want to look at is something that was put out by Masons. If you're trying to find a key to what we're about or what you would find here, and actually the Netflix has a documentary on the Grand Lodge of England. That's not too bad.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
Yeah,
one.
I've seen that one. If you're seeing something like that, and you're interested, just bear in mind we can't recruit. So if you walk in there, there is going to be no high pressure sales tactic to get you to sign on any dotted line or any junk like that. They're going to tell you, hey, just come by every whatever day of the week it is that they meet at this time. We'll get to know you, you'll get to know us, and then when you decide, I mean, that's pretty much universal in Masonry, you decide when you drop the application.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to tell you, hey, you got to drop the application now. You decide when you drop the application, and when you do, then they'll go from there and schedule you to get
Just go through the process. Yeah.
yeah, go through the process. So pretty much you got nothing to lose except for max one night worth of couple of hours worth of sitting down, having a meal, and talking to people.
Yeah. Hey, even if you go for the meal, a lot of it's home cooked.
Well, it depends on what lodge you go to.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So you're not gonna get sold on a bill of goods or anything like that. You're gonna know a good deal about the people. You may not know what you're gonna see when you go through the rituals and ceremonies, but that's to your benefit.
Yeah.
The same ceremonies that I went through, same ceremonies that were essentially all in place when Benjamin Franklin and George Washington and Mozart, all of them, when they became Masons, same ritual, and I can tell you that there's something about Masonry. Hazing has no place in Masonic life or ritual.
Yeah. That's important.
That's all I'm going to say on that one. It's
It's not a college fraternity.
yeah. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not it.
It's like a grown men's society.
You got the only thing that I think you would regret is if you went there with anything less than the intention of reflecting on your own life and your own level as a man, as where you are as far as being able to fit in with your fellow mankind and your service to God.
And I think it's also just to point out, don't have to be rich. Don't it's we got people of all economic statuses in Masonry, because I think that's another misinterpretation that only rich people can be Masons, but that's not necessarily true. Although in some countries it is harder.
You're to have a universal standard, while Masonry does not advocate making it a rich person's thing. It's you're always going to have somebody somewhere out there that's going to subvert the principles in a minor way, but because we're a lodge of multiple people, we kind of have each other to and you generally sit in an officer's position for only 1 year, so people have very little ability to permanently damage the principles, the core principles of Masonry. And it's not a rich person's game. In fact, that is one of the core principles of Masonry is equality. Mm-hmm. You go into that lodge, and I know there is a story that it was right after I think he was out of office. Harry Truman visited a lodge, and they were going to make an introduction, and he said, and they were going to introduce him as the former president, and he said, "No, you don't announce me as the former president. You announce me as the former Grand Master of Pennsylvania."
Yeah, I like that.
So yeah, he was, his only standing in Masonry was his accomplishment in Masonry.
Yeah.
Nothing, no,
There's no titles, no kingmanships. It don't
Yep.
matter. Yeah.
Yep. Not your worldly wealth or
Yeah.
honors.
And that's again, that's what makes, I think, the organization as great as it is, as long lasting as it will be, because the, like you said, the equality among the men in the room in a lodge. Yeah.
Our ability to shed the bigotry that exists outside the lodge, the stereotype, the inequalities, all these things that, going back to having read The Builders, I mean, you're talking about a guy talking about this concept in 1914, and society has kind of advanced on that issue massively in the last 100 years. But 100 years ago, he was already talking about it. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I just want to say I appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, anytime.
And I hope anyone who listens to this at least learns something, maybe,
Yeah.
or enjoys it. And then if you have anything else you'd like to say, if not, we'll just close it out.
No, I think I talked myself out right there.
No, I just want to say I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I was learning along with anyone else listening. I'm fascinated with a lot of the things you talked about. And again, that's again why I loved Freemasonry, because meeting people like yourself where I could have these conversations and really expand my own thought processes has been life-changing for the better.
Like I said, it's a catalyst for epiphany.
I love it.
So
Well, again, Joseph Bonin,
yep.
former, or what we call the past master of Honolulu Lodge. I just want to say thank you for your time. And again, if anyone out there who listened to this was interested in Masonry, you just got to reach out to someone in your area, a lodge, look up the website maybe.
As they say, to be one, ask one.
Yeah.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to approach one if you see they have the ring or something or a decal on their car.
Yeah.
I promise you.
Yeah.
All right, well, I thank you. Thank anyone who listens to this, and you have a good day.
Okay, thank you.